Today I thought we'd do a wee video on the workshop truck. Some of you may have seen this before in real life, some of you may have seen it in pictures, but I thought we'd just we walk around today, go over what we've done to it, what's happened over the years, what little wee tricks and gadgets we put in it, and what it does for us. Okay, so I thought I'd start with the engine. Basically, we're currently running a Type 4 2.3 litre, which has an 80mm crank with 96mm pistons, Keith Black pistons, kit that a lot of guys use in the Type 4s. It's just slightly oversized, and you bore out the original cylinders to get that. We're also running the CB injection, the generation 4 of that, which runs pretty good. I'll show you a wee bit of it running later in the wee laptop setup. Just recently we put in the crank trigger ignition, which you can see down there, the wee teeth hanging out of that pulley, and the wee blank off, so there's no distributor. Effectively it's just a crank trigger, which then the computer runs a wasted spark system. You can see the spark plugs in the background there, and the TPS, which is this throttle position sensor off here, and running into some sort of throttle bodies. You can see I've got a Gatorade bottle which gets changed next week when the alloy breather arrives, and we've got the Porsche alternator and fan set up. As you can see, it gets pretty well used. There's dust everywhere. It's just the environment it works in. It goes on the sort of dirt tracks occasionally because we do a bit of dirt bike riding, and this is the truck we take. As you can see, also there's the oil cooler setup, which I'll show you underneath at some point, and we also run the vintage speed mufflers, of course, and an O2 sensor, so we can keep an eye on that, and the computer also self-learns and sort of adjusts its mixture off that. You can also see, and I'll show this a bit later, there's a solution that we ended up coming with. You can see this wire going up to this hole in the chassis rail. That wire actually goes to the computer, which we've got in the wee click-clack box in the back there. I don't know if you can see it. And that goes all the way to the front, and that's what we actually ended up running the plugging the computer into. And it was a nice tidy way of doing it. We already had the hole in the chassis, as early New Zealand and Australian buses got this wee mod, pickups that got this mod where they use that as the air intake actually. It goes all the way up to the chassis and gets clean air from the front. So you'll see a lot of pickups have that tube in it, and that's where the air cleaner went to, and there's a wee hole bashed in the cab area of where it intook the air. So there's a wee bit of sort of New Zealand, Australian mod there. So yep, that's the engine. I'll show you more from underneath later, and the oil cooler, but that's where that's at. Oh, just one other wee mod. We also put a gas strut on this setup. We thought about making them and offering them to the public, but it actually requires the moving of this mount here, which to make it work properly, which we weren't happy with, because it means it couldn't be retrofitted to an existing bus comfortably. Basically you'd have to be welding and things like that, so we decided not to do it. So here's the cab of our single cab, and you'll probably notice, I'll show you here, we've done some tubbing of the front, and that's just allowed a bit more wheel clearance as it's been lowered. It's a bit of a job to do that, but reasonably simple on the pre-63 combis. We decided to do it just to avoid the rub. Ideally you want it to come out further out here, but we didn't want to do that because that means you have to actually cut into the door area of doing that. So we just got a little bit more clearance there. You can see it's just a bit higher than there. And then replaced this tube here in the seat and re-rolled the seat covering around, which worked out quite well. It gave us a bit more clearance. It still rubs ever so slightly on the edge there, but like I say, I didn't want to cut into the door. There's kind of a limit to what we wanted to do there. Still a success from our point of view, but not probably the full success. So just bear in mind, if you're thinking of tubbing, you need to consider that you actually do need to do it properly, cut into the door there. Moving in here, everything's pretty standard. Fit out wise, we kind of just left it. We painted it blue. It was a green van, but somebody already painted it blue back in the sort of 70s. And actually, here's a good reminder. This is the original colour. We decided to just leave the radio black off plate its original colour as a wee reminder of where it sort of came from. It's a nice wee touch, we think. You'll notice that up here is actually a temperature gauge. We've got a wee temperature probe in the engine bay. It's not the engine temperature, it's actually more like the engine air temperature it's sort of taking in. It's just one way of we monitoring it, just seeing what's happening on various days and what the end result is. Pretty inexpensive thing to do, and it just sits in the engine bay and tells us that. Got the obligatory cell phone holder, and then you'll probably see a phone cord. So just getting in there, it has you can see in there a USB port for charging, sort of hidden away, and we've gone through a USB speaker, and that's the stereo. So it just runs off the phone. Got sort of permanently on charge, and that's only turns on when you turn the key on, which gives you, do it here, beautiful wee blue light there, all cool for the kids. The other thing we've got there tucked away in behind here is our latest upgrade, and this wire up to there. That's actually the auto sensing lights. So what we've got in this now is that when it gets dark and the key is on, the headlights just turn on. So nice wee feature, something we looked at doing, because this Combi basically gets everything that we think of doing. We make it for this, fit it, see what it's like to fit it, see what it's like to live with, and then if we like the product or whatever, we go ahead with it. So that was our latest wee thing. Up in this wee tube here is a wee light sensor that you can adjust. There's a wee adjuster in the box, and how sensitive it is, and yeah, so we're just running that to see if there's any problems, how long it lasts, what it would cost to do, and so on. So a nice wee feature that I quite like, and it's also sort of hidden away as well. We've also got the vintage speed shifter, which was probably one of the better things we've done to this van. It's no longer trying to steer a bowl of pudding. And then for the keen eye, you can actually notice that this tube here flares out at the bottom. This is because we've actually made this tube for the steering, which we'll show you from underneath, because there's not much to show from the top. But actually this pickup, we made and installed rack and pinion steering, which is also electrically assisted. So that is quite complex, and it's probably best shown from underneath, but this is the top end of it. So inside here is a universal that goes to a directional box on the way back, and then the shaft that we made that comes up to the stock steering wheel. And we've ended up having to fit the horn up under here, because the steering shaft is now solid. So yeah, got the obligatory safaris, as good or bad as they are. They also let water in all the time. It's pretty rare you get a dry pair, and that's about it. So we've just gone for the standard interior that it would have basically had, just that black grey card, and you'll notice that all the knobs are black. From my understanding, that's what commercials had. So pickups, vans, any sort of working vehicle would have had black knobs on it, so we've retained all those. So here's just a quick shot of what we did to the seats. So you got this tube here has been replaced with a bow in it. Normally it's straight, and that was for the seat hump basically. It's a bit ugly because we just sort of welded it in there, welded some tacks on and put it back together. But the thing with this bus, it's not a show bus, it's just sort of painted nicely, but the idea is it's a working bus and it's a proving ground for us on various products, and it gets used, so we're not going to be too pretty about it all the time. So moving on to steering, this is actually it is called a computer for the steering. So this whole unit here, we've hidden it in this wee treasure chest type storage area. It's sort of the best place for it. It's protected from the environment and out of the way because we don't need to adjust it too often or tend to it, and it runs the electric assisted steering. So it's a nice wee unit. It's actually out of a Vauxhall Corsa and various other vehicles, but the unit is actually, this unit is made by Mitsubishi Electric, so it's a bit of a combination of everything, but that's what they use. And you'll see this adjuster knob on here that has been sort of linked into the computer a little bit, and then we can wind up or wind down the assistance, because on the motor itself it actually has a load sensor, so it reacts on the amount of load it senses and the amount of output that the motor puts, but we can actually dictate or manipulate that, how much assistance comes out of it to give better steering feel. So that's that wee unit hidden away in there. Luckily we don't get to see this thing much because it just sits there and does its thing, and no real moving parts. We've sort of set this to a point where we like it, and we've left it. Getting onto that cable that we saw with the engine, here it is here. Pops out of that chassis rail, which we saw in the engine bay, comes along, and then we've just tucked it so it sits under the seat. There's a bit of Velcro on the floor there, and a bit of Velcro on the USB thing, which we normally plug into the computer, and that just sits on that bit of Velcro, so it doesn't get in the way of anyone until we need it, and we just Velcro it off, put it into the laptop, and do what we need to do, and then tidy it back up. Now the interesting thing, or the sort of note thing of this, is that where it comes out of the computer, it's a 3.5mm jack, which is a lot like the sort of common headphone jack, the small headphone jack. Then it goes to a 12-point pin plug like the old PCs of the sort of 90s had, and then we've got it converted to this USB plug. So it's quite funny that it goes from a 3.5 to the 12 pin to this. It's sort of going up in technology as it goes through the van, and that's actually joined halfway down this tube down here, which it gets there, it's reliable, it's kept and safe. We've wired the plug together so there's actually no way it can come apart, and it does the job really well. We just sort of plug into it and push it away when we don't need it. So yeah. Okay, so here we have the underside of the van. This is the steering box that the steering column goes onto, where that universal goes onto. I think you can just see the universal up in here. Goes through this angle box. We've modified the support here to hold this angle box, which comes off like a Mazda. It's got all the standard pedal arrangement. One of the butties bits, linkages through there, which a lot of guys are going for, and then it goes through the universal, and here is the electric power steering motor that we talked about that goes to the computer in the top. You can see the wires going off under there that we talked about before. Inside this little bit here, sorry about the filming, is the sensor for the load, and then so that's what we're talking about, the load sensoring part, and then the motor that actually powers the continuation of the drive system. So as you look at it, it actually goes over to the left hand side of the van, which is kind of crazy.